I
Okay.
think oftentimes young people, young practitioners or students, when they think about public relations, they might only be thinking about that sort of that technician role. But
Yes.
you've talked a lot about the counseling role of public relations, and I'm wondering if you could talk more about that counseling role, what you perceive as the status of that counseling role uh, in the corporate world today.
Well, it's certainly a multifaceted question. Um, the counseling role, yeah, it's in some jeopardy, but not in the right place, not in the best places. CEOs today are smarter and smarter about their roles, and they are also surprised, most of them, to learn how much time they have to devote in their roles to communications, and they know they need counsel to do that. Um, it's an interesting topic to take up with younger people, particularly in college and communications schools, because they all ask the question, well, how do you become a counselor? And I said, I usually say, starting right now, everything that you do, every project that you take on, needs to be looked at, and you need to take from that involvement or that project or that assignment something that you learned about the execution of that, the development of the strategy for the client that you were working with, and that's the element that you take forward, and that becomes eventually a part of who you are. And when you turn around and start providing counsel to those who are younger or organizations, you're going to find yourself drawing on those experiences. And that's how you become a counselor. There isn't any strict academic track that you have to follow. It's just it's more a matter of paying attention to what's happening around you, what you're doing, the reasons why certain things have occurred, what lessons you can learn, and that's the track. That's the way to begin to get there. Now, I would also say that at the college experience, university experience, I'm fond of telling young people, that we get into a discussion about why they're here, why are they doing this, and the bottom line is they're there to learn how to learn. Um, the requirement for a bachelor's degree or whatever is not dependent necessarily on rote memorization of formulas or a perfect recitation of American history or whatever topic. But these subjects are put out to students to teach them how to learn. And that's a particularly critical element in the background of a good public relations person, the ability to learn quickly, and the ability to take that new learning and to act on it. That's certainly the bottom line in good crisis management. In this role, particularly in major organizations, things happen very quickly, and from phone call to phone call, literally, and today it would be from tweet to tweet, literally, or Facebook post. New things are happening, and if they pose some kind of a problem or a threat to your organization, it could be that you've never ever heard this topic, some problem with a particular line that you haven't focused on. Well, you have to learn quickly. What is that all about? What was that? What was behind that? And you have to make a decision very quickly. Do you have enough information, or do you need more information? And where do you get it? And then, based on your background and experience of other kinds of learnings and situations that you've gone through, you try to understand what is it you believe about what you've now learned, and how is that going to affect your decision or your advice to management for handling that problem.
Are you willing, can I ask a general question about the page principles and let you talk some about, take it wherever you want to take it for the interview? You've talked about values, and of course Arthur Page comes to mind when we think about the page principles. and the way those can be really read and understood as values. And I'm wondering if you'll talk about the Page principles and their value to the profession.
Well, I think the Page principles have come to represent a real definition of how we intend to practice. They're not really a definition of the technical aspects of communications. There's nothing in there about how to write a press release or the quality of the annual report you ought to be putting out or the counsel. But what they reflect is Arthur Page's true understanding of his role in the Bell system and the influence that he wanted to have over decision making. And I think that as Jack Coton and others reviewed the work of Arthur Page, they knew that these principles were important and that it would be very important for future generations to try to codify this, and that's what they've done. Telling the truth, that too often in my book we get down to these one-liners: tell the truth, prove it with action, recognize blah blah blah. But once in a while you need to go back and read the whole statement about what do we mean about telling the truth, and what do we mean about proving it with action. Proving it with action is probably one of the most important principles for me, and it was an issue that I focused on in my career, and that had to do with the behavior of an organization and making sure that that behavior was consistent always with the values that it publicly said were important to it. The worst thing you can do and lose your integrity totally is to say that you believe in one thing and create a perception that you're acting in some other way or in self-interest and away from that. So telling the truth, proving it with action, that is behaviors, decision-making on tough issues in any business that is consistent with what you've said is important to your organization, that's the crux of it. I mean, it from there it's about how do you articulate that, how do you write that, how do you place it, how do you get it. Those are all things that good education programs will teach people to do in our field. But understanding the importance of that function as a part of what we do and is very important in the first place. And then secondly, how you execute that within your organization is another dimension of that. And the whole issue with that, I believe, comes down to our own, certainly our experience, our good judgment, born on years of experience, but also self-confidence in what we know to be true and what we know to be right about a situation, and to be able to stand our ground, not to back down when you get into an argument with somebody who may see it a little differently, but to have the self-confidence to be there and necessary to put your career on the line to prevail on your point of view. So that second principle in there holds a ton of stuff for me in terms of defining who we are, the importance of what we do, the philosophical underpinnings of what we do. We don't show up in a management meeting with the decisions of old judges or court cases, which general counsel can support. We don't have the Accounting Practices and Standards Board, which the chief financial officer is going to bring. We don't have all the employment laws and practices that the HR person is going to show up with. We don't have the FDA's requirements. Sometimes we do, but there are people in management who represent those points of view. We don't have any studied hierarchical academic positioning, and so how do you make that dog hunt? Someone would say. Well, it's the strength of your convictions about who you are and the relationships you've already established with those people who are going to say, I don't entirely agree with him, but there's a ring of truth in what he's saying, and it takes intestinal fortitude and a lot of self-confidence to stand in those positions and to prevail in those arguments. It helps a lot to be able to turn to contemporaries through the Page Society and to know that they're operating against a statement or a statement of principles that are consistent with what you're advocating. So there's huge value in that. Let me speak to one other principle that I think is terribly important, and that's the last one, which is to remain calm, patient, and good-humored. It sounds silly to mention in the face of telling the truth and proving with action and all those other dimensions, but it's really important. And what it says is that it's important for us not to take ourselves too seriously all the time, to recognize that in our society, in our free society, in the organizations that we represent, there has to be a balance of views. We need to keep the team together. We need to keep everybody advancing on the same track and inspired and committed to supporting one another. You can't get there if you're just hammering everyone else saying, we're not going to do that because it's not true, or it's not the whole truth, or, you can take this kind of policing stance in your organization, and some people do, and policing is a good thing. But I think where you really win acceptance and endorsement is if you're known as not taking yourself so seriously, and that the world is not going to end tomorrow. That you're willing to compromise when it's appropriate to compromise. I think that last principle also speaks to maintaining a commitment to a principle for a long term. It's hard to do in the short term. Tony Blair has suggested that you almost need a short-term public policy and then a long-term commitment to your values. That you need to be able to live with both dimensions and be okay with that. And I know a lot of people who have found the peace of that idea, that the commitment to prevail in the long term, but to survive in the short term. And that's where the art of our practice comes into play. It truly is. And I think it's a very important kind of understanding that we need to get into, particularly young people who are coming along in this profession.